Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus. Two explorers, two worlds. One unforgettable impact. The story of human curiosity is written not only through conquests and wars, but through the voyages and daring journeys of those who dared to cross the unknown. When we think of travelers who not only traversed continents but also reshaped the world's awareness of itself, two names arise as legends: Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus. 1. The Venetian merchant adventurer who walked the Silk Roads to the court of Kublai Khan and lived to tell the tale. The other, the Genoese navigator who sailed west across the Atlantic, believing he would find an alternate route to Asia, yet stumbled upon a new world. Though separated by more than 2 centuries, both shared an unquenchable wanderlust, a willingness to embrace danger, and a transformative vision that expanded humanity's map. This comparison will explore their journey styles, their motivations, their visions of the world, and the long-term impact of their voyages, flowing continuously without tabular breaks. Marco Polo. The Silk Road storyteller, the vision of the East. Marco Polo, c. 1254 to 1324, was born in Venice, into a family of merchants. In 1271, along with his father and uncle, he embarked on an overland journey to Asia that would last nearly 24 years. Their destination, the distant court of the Mongol ruler Kublai Khan in China, a realm scarcely imagined by most Europeans of the time. Polo traversed deserts, mountains, and steppe, trading, negotiating, and absorbing information, but, most importantly, observing, recording, and internalizing a world utterly different from European Christendom. His journey was not one of conquest, but of passage and cultural discovery. He moved slowly but steadily, caravan by caravan, relying on diplomacy, trade, and sometimes sheer luck. He was not the typical conqueror brandishing sword and shield. He was a merchant using guile, patience, and curiosity. In doing so, he bridged 2 distant worlds. On arriving in Kublai Khan's court, he impressed with his honesty, adaptability, and the breadth of his accounts. He reportedly became part of the Khan's inner circle, trusted enough to journey on diplomatic and administrative errands throughout China and its peripheries. What Marco Polo brought back to Europe was nothing less than a revelation: descriptions of cities of unimaginable size, unfamiliar customs and technologies, paper money, advanced urban culture, and a civilization both ancient and sophisticated. His book, commonly called The Travels of Marco Polo, read like a mixture of reality and myth, but carried enough plausibility to captivate European audiences for centuries. Through him, Europeans began to imagine Asia not as a distant, mystical realm of legend, but as a tangible, complex, real world, full of wealth, power, and trade opportunities. Marco Polo's legacy is cultural and imaginative. He did not conquer lands, but conquered geographical ignorance, igniting the European imagination about the East. His narrative planted seeds of curiosity, ambition, and ambition for trade. For Europe's later generations, merchants, explorers, and scholars, Asia became part of a reachable world. Polo's journey essentially expanded the mental horizon of Europe before the advent of modern global exploration. Christopher Columbus. The Atlantic pioneer, the strategy of westward leap. Christopher Columbus, 1451 to 1506, emerged from Genoa as a sailor and navigator driven by a dream to reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic, rather than the long and dangerous overland or eastern sea routes. In 1492, backed by the royal patrons of Spain, he set sail with 3 small ships, a modest expedition by any measure, and plunged into the unknown with conviction, hope, and audacity. Columbus's genius was not in peaceful travel but in defiance of conventional wisdom. Most learned men of his age dismissed the idea that the Atlantic led to anything but open ocean and perhaps small islands. Columbus, however, believed geography and miscalculations allowed for an alternate path. He navigated by the stars, wind, and currents with little more than gut instinct, boldness, and unshakable faith. When he landed in the Bahamas, then proceeded to explore parts of the Caribbean and Central America, he believed he had reached islands off the coast of East Asia. What Columbus unveiled was not Asia, but a new world, a vast and virgin land unknown to Europeans. His expedition changed the course of history. Through him, Europe discovered continents previously entirely outside their maps, opening the door for colonization, trade, conquest, and tragic consequences. Columbus was not just a traveler, he was the harbinger of a global reordering. His voyages sparked the age of European overseas expansion, the clash of civilizations, and the birth of a world connected like never before. Columbus's legacy is double-edged. On one hand, he opened the Atlantic world, trade routes, cultural exchanges, and for better or worse, the globalization of goods, ideas, and peoples. On the other hand, his arrival marked the beginning of centuries of colonial exploitation, the decimation of indigenous populations, and enduring historical trauma. Yet it is undeniable that his leap westward defined the world's future. The explorers' bond and the divergence of their outcomes. Though born over 2 centuries apart and traveling different routes, one over land toward the east, the other by sea toward the west, Marco Polo and Columbus shared several deeper similarities. Both were driven by vision beyond their time, by a curiosity that refused to accept inherited ignorance. Both understood that the known world could and should be challenged either by long caravans winding through deserts and mountains, or by wooden ships braving untamed seas. Both men expanded the mental map of Europe. Polo retold Asia's grandeur to merchants, scholars, and dreamers who could scarcely imagine such places. Columbus physically brought new continents into European consciousness, forever changing geopolitics. Both voyages required daring, persistence, and a willingness to endure hardship, hunger, storms, hostility, uncertainty, for the sake of discovery. Both rewrote the world not with armies, but with navigation, words, and vision. Yet the divergence between their destinies and the nature of their legacy is profound. Marco Polo returned to Europe with wonder, stories, and wealth, but continued his life as a merchant, relatively safe, relatively unknown in terms of power. His legacy was subtle and slow, it spread through curiosity, literature, and trade routes. Columbus returned initially celebrated, heralded as a hero, but his success opened a wave of conquest, colonization, and conflict. His legacy was loud and immediate, rewriting world maps, stirring imperial ambitions, but also igniting centuries of suffering for native populations. Marco Polo broadened horizons, Columbus redefined borders. Polo invited Europe to dream of the East, Columbus forced Europe into the rest of the world. Marco Polo's return symbolized the triumph of curiosity, Columbus's arrival symbolized the dawn of a new, connected, and contested, global era. Both men, in their own ways, proved that a human being does not need armies or crowns to change the course of history. A ship, a camel, a caravan, or simply a pen and parchment, armed with vision and courage, can redraw humanity's map. Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus remain immortal, not for dominion over lands, but for expansion of human awareness. They are the explorers who, beyond their journeys, continue to rule the realms of geography, imagination, and history. If you liked this comparison, don't forget to support the channel. Likes, comments, and subscribing power the continuation of content like this. Which other explorers, thinkers, or historical adventurers do you think we should compare in the next video?